Welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we're going to be making sort of a base recipe. This is a pie crust recipe and it is separate from all the other recipes in the Poole's Diner cookbook. So luckily this makes 4 pie crusts. So we're going to use it for a few different things, but we'll put this video up by itself so you can mix and match however you want. But so let's get started. It's an all butter pie crust, so we have a lot of butter because, like I said, this is 4 pie crusts. We have some salt. We have our flour already, all-purpose flour already measured out. We have some salt and we have some sugar. And I'm just going to give these a mix with a whisk. Kind of breaks up any lumps in the flour and gets the sugar and the salt mixed up. Not in the recipe, I just wanted to do it that way. So, and then we're going to add all of our butter, which is cold and unsalted and cut into cubes. And then we're gonna sort of get it mixed up into the flour a little bit with my hands. And then this all together goes in the freezer for 30 minutes. So we'll be back in about 30 minutes. So now our mixture has been in the freezer for a little more than 30 minutes, and all we have to do now is use 2 butter knives and basically cut this up until the butter is the size of about a pea. They make particular tools for this kind of thing. And we have one, but this is the method that she suggests, and honestly I never think that tool works very well anyway. And this is how I've done it since I was a kid, making my first pie crust ever all by myself. So I'm gonna keep doing that until we get to the pea size, and then we'll see what's next. The knife started hurting my arms, hurting my hands. This is a lot, and I've been kneading bread dough, so I got out my pastry cutter and we're gonna try that. See if it helps. I'm gonna call this good because the next step is actually getting my hands in there and sort of stretching the pieces of butter between your hands into ribbons. And so that will help break up any of the larger chunks I have. And with everything being frozen, my hands won't warm it up too much because it's really chilly in there. So just kind of doing that with my hands. Okay, I'm gonna call this done. And now we need to start adding water, ice water by the tablespoon. This is way more than it will need, but we just threw some ice and some water in here and it's been hanging out the whole time. So I'm just gonna mix that in with my hand. And you're supposed to just mix enough in until you can sort of pinch it together like a pie dough and it sticks together. So. All right, so I think I'm about there, and I'm going to turn it out onto my countertop just because the bowl is getting unwieldy. And I've tried not to overwork it, but yeah, with occasionally pinching to see if it holds together. So first, you bring it together into a ball. Don't want to knead it really, but bring it all together. And this is more like, so if you watched my tomato pie from Deep Run Roots video, this is a different method for pie crust, and this is more like I would expect it to look like. It's still got to hydrate in the refrigerator or in the freezer or whatever, so it can be a little crumbly at this point, but that one was a little bit too crumbly. With her recipe, she had exact measurements and didn't tell you to sort of estimate or use however much you think you needed to until it got to a certain stage. Whereas in here, she said 2/3 of a cup, although I'm pretty sure I used a lot more than that. I didn't measure. And then just go by feel. So I think with pie crust, going by feel is probably better, just because everybody's flour is differently hydrated and depending on where you are in the world and all that. So now we're supposed to divide it into 4 roughly equal pieces and form these into discs. All right. And then we're gonna wrap it in plastic wrap. You let it go in the refrigerator for at least an hour, or you can freeze these for, I think, up to 6 months, she says. So, might be a little over actually, depending. It's a little bit sticky, but hopefully it will hydrate and be fine. So, I'm gonna get all of these into a roughly disc-like shape and then wrap them in plastic wrap and put them in the freezer. The next thing we do is blind bake them. Not all recipes require you to blind bake your pie crust, but I think most of hers do. So that will be next. This has been in the refrigerator for over an hour. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it's been over an hour. And now we're going to roll it out, and I hope it rolls out well. We've got our well-floured countertop here. Put some on top of it. It still seems a little sticky, but the goal is to roll this out into an 11-inch circle, about 1/8 of an inch thick. Okay, I think this will fit in my pie pan. So, I've got that right here. And I'm going to roll this up a bit on here. And just, that's not at all right. Gotta move it. All right, that's better. All right, and they say to trim the overhang to 1/2 of an inch and then crimp as desired. So, I am gonna do this with scissors. This is a lot easier than a knife, especially if your knives are not necessarily all that sharp. I'm just going to guesstimate 1/2 an inch. All right, it's about right. Let me use a little bit of this here where we have a little bit of a break on the edge. And I'm going to kind of fold it under, fold that 1/2 inch under and pinch and try not to get it too thin in any place. This is just how I've always pinched the edges. There are lots of different ways to make a pretty pie crust, but she says to freeze this overnight. We ain't got time for that. I'm gonna go ahead and blind bake it as is. This is another place where you really have to read the recipe all the way through. So, yeah, we're not gonna freeze this overnight. Next time, the next recipe, I'll make sure to do that. We don't have time for that. So, I'm gonna put parchment paper in it, and then my pie beans, which same ones I used for the last pie that I made, and we're gonna bake it at 325 convection or 350 without convection for 1/2 an hour. So let me go ahead and get parchment paper. And pie beans. As I said in my other, the last pie I made video, these are not special beans, they're just dried beans that I had on hand one time when I needed to blind bake a pie crust. And so I just put them in here and save them and use them every time. So put this in the oven and we'll come back when it's done. All right, this is our par-baked pie crust. You can tell it is not entirely baked. There's no color really even on the edges. There's a tiny bit in some places, but this is the end result of the Poole's pie crust recipe. This is basically for use in other recipes. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, we made pie crust. And this is from the Poole's Diner Cookbook by Ashley Christensen. And we used it now in 2 different ways. So the first pie crust I baked, so this recipe actually is for 4 pie crusts. You can freeze them and use them later, so that was good. We used them for 2 recipes, and the first time I baked it, I blind baked it exactly as the recipe said, and at the end my pie crust was not, at the end of the pie, when the pie was done, my pie crust, the bottom crust, was not completely done. It was still a little raw. So when I used it the second time, I went ahead and cooked it for like another 10 minutes, par-baked it for another 10 minutes, same everything else, but an extra 10 minutes. And that was a lot better. So might be just my oven not quite right. I don't know. I don't really check the temperature. Probably should, but so I needed an extra about 10 minutes. The good thing about this recipe is that she doesn't tell you exactly how much water to use. There's a measurement, but we ended up using a lot more than that to get it to the right consistency, and I think that was good. As far as the flavor, I think I needed a little more salt. The crust just didn't have a lot. Like, it just needed a little something. It wasn't bad. It was flaky. It was fine. It just, I think, needed a touch more salt. And that might be because my kosher salt might be slightly different than her kosher salt, and might have less salt per ounce, or not per ounce. My husband and I had a huge discussion about ounces being both weight and fluid ounces, and that's probably coloring my mind right now. But so for a teaspoon of kosher salt, my kosher salt might have less actual salt in it than hers because of the crystals take up more space. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I felt like I needed a little more salt in this recipe. But all in all, it was nice to be able to make a large batch and have extra pie crust so that the next time I made it, I didn't have to go through to the trouble to make the pie crust again. So thanks for watching Cooking the Books with Heather, and if you enjoyed this recipe, please hit the subscribe button and stay tuned, and you'll see how we used the pie crust.